In the dark corners of Night City, there are bars and clubs that are more than just simple places to party. They are pivotal points in many legendary stories, so much so that the places themselves became part of the lore and ultimately legendary. 3 of these places stand out in particular: Atlantis, Forlorn Hope, and Afterlife. Each of these clubs has its own story, its own soul, and its own set of rules. Knowing these places gives you a better understanding of the depths of this city and the people who live and die here. So let's get to know these spots. Let's start with Atlantis. Why? Well, I thought it fitting to begin with the club that had no rules when it came to its patrons. Anyone could visit Atlantis. Veterans and newcomers, fixers, solos, corporate employees, media types, netrunners, rock stars, off-duty cops, con artists, forgotten legends, washed-up pop stars, spies, and many more. Here, street reputation actually mattered very little. Everyone was welcome. Getting in was quite easy, but getting out safely was a whole different story. In its early years, Atlantis was known primarily as a hangout for anarchists. Over time, both the decor and the atmosphere changed, and the club took on more of a suburban bar vibe. By the 2010s, Atlantis had become a popular spot for aspiring business people and mercenaries offering their services. This was particularly interesting because anyone could walk into Atlantis to look for a service provider for their problem. Sometimes the problem itself walked in as well. As a result, the club frequently experienced small or large conflicts. One of the most spectacular incidents occurred in 2013 when Johnny Silverhand and his newly hired mercenary crew engaged in a shootout with Sakas, who had suddenly appeared in Atlantis. It was a wild shootout. I'm still surprised that only one John Doe was killed in the process. Silverhand's crew managed to leave Atlantis alive, leaving behind a few dead Sakas and, even worse, an open debt. But such nights went down in history and were the very fabric from which legendary places are made. It had its own unique charm in that you never knew how wild it would get. You only knew it would be wild. It's no wonder that Atlantis became more and more famous in the following years, evolving into a central spot for information exchange, mercenary jobs, and favors. Due to its immense popularity, Atlantis became one of the most expensive clubs in Night City by 2020, offering a wide range of spirits, beers, and cocktails. It stayed true to its roots and avoided any major regulations. However, there was an unwritten but well-known rule among the guests. If there was trouble between people, they settled it themselves. So the problem and its resolution, whatever it might be, always remained a matter for the warring parties. No outsider was to interfere. In the 2030s and 2040s, during the Red Era and after the Fourth Corporate War, the building housing Atlantis was in a newly developed district called the Glen, which was planned as the new government center of Night City. By 2045, Atlantis was known for its stylish architecture and upscale interior, attracting a glamorous, discerning clientele. It could have continued like this indefinitely until some crazy bozo or other deranged figure blew the place up. That would have been a real end for the club, but reality was far less glamorous. In the end, a period of economic collapse in Night City brought about the club's downfall. Today, in 2077, the premises of Atlantis are boarded up. Perhaps someone is just waiting for the right moment to bring this legendary place back. In Cyberpunk 2077, we visit Atlantis during the main mission as Johnny, who in 2013 was looking for Roque to ask for her help. In 2077, the club is long out of order. However, there is a way to visit the place. I've linked a video in the description that shows you how. Next up is the Forlorn Hope, which is actually more of a bar than a club. From the very beginning, it was more than just a simple place to drink. It was a refuge for those returning from various wars who had nowhere else to belong. After the end of the Second Central American War in 2010, many returning veterans from the United States were profoundly changed. Many of these former soldiers became solos or hired mercenaries. It was only natural that they sought the company of like-minded individuals. John Freeman, alias the Professor, and William Dolarhyde, alias Dollar Bill, with the support of veterans they had served with, purchased an old Victorian building in Night City between 2011 and 2015. This building, once known as the Sierra Hotel, was located near Charter Hill and the former battle zones of Night City. They renovated the building and transformed the hotel's lobby into Forlorn Hope, a bar specifically designed for veterans to connect and exchange stories. The other floors of the four-story building were used as apartments and accommodations. During the renovation, John Freeman met his wife, Mary Ann. After they married, they co-managed the Forlorn Hope. John oversaw the bar's management and handled administrative tasks, while Mary Ann took care of the day-to-day operations. She also kept an eye on supplies and finances, handled payroll, and occasionally worked behind the bar. William, or Dollar Bill, remained more in the background as a co-owner of the building. Initially, the new establishment was a second home for war veterans. Although the primary clientele was solos, the bar also attracted other freelancers, including nomads, netrunners, and fixers. The location was known only to a small, tight-knit group of guests and wasn't advertised. Therefore, there were no big names, no corpos, and no gangs. The Hope also offered various services, including weapons maintenance, secure conference and meeting rooms, job placement, safe accommodation for veterans and solos, and its own Ripperdoc clinic in the basement. In the following years, Forlorn Hope thrived and became a legendary place among edgerunners. Unlike Atlantis, you couldn't just stroll in as you pleased. You had to be accepted or not. Once you were in, you didn't have to prove yourself repeatedly to be allowed into the bar. However, being in the bar was only the beginning. Earning the respect of the guests was another matter entirely. Younger members often struggled because many tried to gain respect through bragging and fabricated heroic deeds. This was precisely what the people at Forlorn Hope hated. But even more than young, overzealous punks, they despised people who betrayed their own chums. Betrayal was the cardinal sin at Forlorn Hope. The bar was usually packed in the evenings and nights. Bar brawls were rare, and when they did occur, they were quickly broken up, with the troublemakers being thrown out. Weapons were allowed in the bar and could be displayed, but their use or brandishing was strictly forbidden. The exception was the staff, who were allowed to use their weapons if necessary. During the week, the bar closed relatively early, around 2 a.m., while on weekends, it stayed open until the early morning hours to allow guests to party extensively. In 2020, reporter C.J. O'Reilly wrote an article about Forlorn Hope in Solo of Fortune after visiting the place and interviewing staff and guests. This article became O'Reilly's most famous work due to its honest reporting, which was quite rare at the time. Forlorn Hope was definitely a special place in the 20s. However, after the Fourth Corporate War, everything changed. Dollar Bill, like so many others, paid with his life for the war's allowance of anything goes. An atomic explosion at the Arasaka Tower in Night City changed everything. John and Mary Ann survived, but the old Forlorn Hope became history. In the 2040s, the new Forlorn Hope was located in Little China. The club, which continued to serve veterans of the South American Wars and the Fourth Corporate War, was described as a quiet neighborhood bar with a well-stocked bar. The clientele mainly consisted of experienced edgerunners, military personnel, or police officers, as well as some of the best solos in Night City. Even Rogue occasionally met aspiring edgerunners at Forlorn Hope who were not yet ready for the Afterlife. Of course, this was always with the approval of Forlorn Hope's management. In the following years, Forlorn Hope occasionally made headlines. In 2045, a group of bozos called the Dirty Bozos caused trouble, leading to numerous deaths and significant property damage. It turned out that the attack was organized by Bozo Big Top, who wanted to outdo his bozo colleagues in pranks. The people at Forlorn Hope found this less amusing, but somehow the issue was resolved. Forlorn Hope was also occasionally used as a base for various operations. People still talk about a mercenary crew from Forlorn Hope taking down an AI from the old net. The mission was commissioned by a Militech major named Veronica Stiles, who sought revenge because the AI had killed her daughter. Apparently, her status at Militech wasn't enough, so she turned to the highly reliable mercenaries at Forlorn Hope. What became of the bar is unclear. However, it is mentioned in the Cyberpunk 2077 files, which suggests two things. Firstly, it was intended to play a role in Cyberpunk 2077 at some point, and secondly, Forlorn Hope likely endured until 2077. It's possible that this bar might play a role again someday. Now we've reached the Afterlife and the elite level. In the 10s, the Afterlife was originally a converted mortuary turned into a bar. There were 3 distinct areas frequented by hard-drinking and hard-fighting solos who enjoyed the atmosphere and camaraderie here. The further you went into the Afterlife, the darker and more dangerous the rooms became, with the final area occupied by combat veterans hired for the highest pay. As a club for professionals, no one had to prove their skills. Simply being in the club was proof enough. Guests adhered to a strict code of honor and fights were strictly for fun. There were hard hits, but never to injure or kill. Due to the high concentration of solos, the Afterlife was the best place in Night City to find armed help. Some people dared to venture into the Afterlife for this purpose. However, anyone entering the establishment did so at their own risk, and some had paid dearly in the past. That's why many preferred to simply write their orders on signs, which were then passed around in the club. This continued until the Great Disaster struck. The Afterlife narrowly survived the destruction during the Fourth Corporate War and the Big Bomb in Night City. After the district boundaries shifted, the bar was now on the edge of the hot zone in Upper Marina and was taken over by the famous solo Rogue. She used the club as a meeting place for local solos and occasionally acted as an intermediary for potential contacts. Over the years, the atmosphere of the Afterlife changed, transforming from a loud bar into a more pleasant nightclub ambience. By the 2040s, the Afterlife maintained its reputation as a premier solo bar in Night City. Mercenaries often dreamed of getting a drink named after them at the Afterlife, though this only happened if they paid the highest price and, of course, had accomplished something cool beforehand. The mercenaries at Afterlife were usually busy waiting for a new job or a message from their favorite fixer. With the chaos in Night City, it usually didn't take long for one of the two to arrive. Betting was also common here, with different groups wagering on who would tackle specific problems in the city. Everyone knew that Rogue usually brought her clients and mercenaries to the Afterlife, but this was only for those who had proven their worth. To meet rising talents, she preferred to go to Forlorn Hope. After the corporate plaza was rebuilt and downtown established, the club was abandoned. The area simply reeked too much of corpo crap. Rogue found a new location in the southern part of Watson, where she founded the new Afterlife. As usual, she built it up in a former mortuary. This is the location we know and love from Cyberpunk 2077. Even today, or rather, precisely today, not everyone can simply enter the Afterlife. Only those who have made a name for themselves or are invited by someone who has made a name for themselves are allowed in. The highest honor is still to have a drink named after you on the menu. Each of these clubs, Atlantis, Forlorn Hope, and Afterlife, became an important chapter in the history of Night City. Atlantis represented the unbridled energy and constant danger of the city, where every night wrote a new story. Forlorn Hope likely still provides a place of community and respect for those returning from wars in 2077, while Afterlife brings together the elite of solos and mercenaries to celebrate their skills and fame. Together, they drive the story of Night City forward in their relentless pursuit of respect, fame, and fortune. A story that never ends and knows no happy endings, but leaves plenty of room for dreaming.
She pulls my trigger, got me up alright. It's a danger pretty here in Night City. She pulls